So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Pure Digital Passion podcast with Moses Kemibaro. And today I have a very interesting guest with me. His name is Oladosu Teyibo. He's from Nigeria, as you can imagine with his name. He runs an exciting technology services business that generally focuses on outsourcing professional technology services globally. The company is called Analogue Teams, and thank you very much for joining us today, Oladosu.
Thank you very much for having me, Moses. Looking forward to having this conversation.
So let's take it from the top, right? You have this business that essentially, for all intents and purposes, outsources services from a technology standpoint. But I think let's start off with a little bit more about who you are. What's your professional and personal background, and how did you get here?
Yeah. Uh, so as you mentioned, I'm a Nigerian Yoruba. I was born actually in the States, but I did my primary schools and some of my secondary school in Nigeria, and frequented Nigeria throughout my time as a young man. I went to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and studied information systems. And I was actually on the collegiate track team, which I met. That's where I met my current co-founder, Yawa
No
Dantor.
way. So you're an athlete then. You've been in sports,
I'm
correct?
an athlete. I'm an athlete. I'm a Division 1 collegiate athlete.
Well, what sport
It
is that
seems
in?
like ages ago.
What sport is that in?
Track and field.
Oh, track and field. Nice, nice. Nigeria has
Yes.
a strong legacy in that space, just like
Yeah.
Kenya.
Yeah. No, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, And just throughout my time, I realized my heart and passion outside of track and field was in technology. And so I went on to from university to work at General Dynamics IT as a programmer analyst. Um, Soon after, I transitioned into a business analyst as I enjoyed more of the business portion of building product, and being a liaison between the business side and the technologists. That's actually that company, General Dynamics IT, is where I actually met my other co-founder, Myesha Luster, who has the three of us have built Analogue. Pretty much once I was leaving that job, I was thinking of either going into another corporate opportunity or potentially just starting something for myself. And so I decided to take the latter and build my own business. So I started off selling hardware, computers, customized high-end computers to associates that I had in connections I had in Nigeria, the government, some of the high-level players, and just building custom PCs for them. And once I was able to kind of really find a market there, I was faced with the choice of doubling down and marketing and really trying to find a new user base, or I could pivot. And so I took my earnings from that business and invested it into multiple places. One was a car company, which was just a used car salesman. I was just trying to figure out how to make money. Um, and I did that with someone who actually became our who was Analogue's former CTO. He joined us in the creation of Analogue, as well as a natural hair care brand called Frowetry, that focuses on creating non really healthy products for Black women and Black women hair. And so that company is actually still in existence. And then last but not least was Analogue Teams. We started that because we had a plan that we wanted for Africa over the next 20 years, to be a leader in the forefront of technology as a whole. But we decided that we, instead of doing it at the end of our careers, that we would actually go ahead and do that right now. And so that's what led us into Africa. I actually moved to Kenya to learn more about M-Pesa because at the time we were doing the foundational work for eNaira, which has recently been released in Nigeria. So I lived in Kenya for a year just to understand the technology scene there, how M-Pesa works, and the beauty of a cashless society. And then from there, moved to Nigeria for a year to kind of just reground, get rooted again into the society there as well. While my co-founder Yao traveled to Rwanda, traveled to Togo and Ghana as well to kind of sow our roots there and make great connections. Over the time past that, we ended up just finding really amazing talent over the different countries. We realized that they were more talented more gracious, more hungry than or hungrier than we could ever imagine. And so our timeline for 20 years moved up to now. And for the last 2 or 3 years, we've just been meeting great technologists, bringing them onto our team, getting projects in the States, staffing great individuals with high potential, high capacity, and building analog teams.
So let me get this straight, and this is really interesting. So what you're telling me, in effect, is that you've been going through several pivots in analog teams, in the sense that your initial thesis was possibly something around the digital currencies or the mobile money space, and then eventually realized that there's probably a bigger space around talent being able to exploit their potential and their capabilities to actually develop technology solutions, right?
Correct. Absolutely. We pivoting is as a necessity in any business. And we believe that when we were going down our path, we realized that there was a lot of uphill battles to make some of the things that we wanted to happen. However, if we were able to just utilize the talent, um, we could essentially hire. Our whole goal was to build this bridge and to create a company where we can hire the most amazing technologists. And so we realized we could accomplish our goal without a product, with just selling services. And so that's what led us into that degree.
Why the name analog teams? I found that quite peculiar, given that you're in the digital space where you've used this term analog. Is there any, quirky, origin story behind that particular name?
Yeah, that's great. So the initial name was Afrotech, and the year we wanted to start our company is the year that Afrotech, the large Black owned um, media company, started. That was actually the same year they started. So we realized we had to come up with a different name. Yao, my co-founder, was actually the one who came up with the name Analogue, and the concept behind it was the fact that people are analog, and as we move into this digital world, in which you kind of things are so created, and we forget about the person, the human. We wanted to kind of have that play on words where we're still very future focused. We're still, on the advent of the digital world, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we remain people focused, that the human being is at the center of all that we do. And so that's where the name Analog came. We actually initially started as Analog Africa, focused on, obviously promoting the fact that we are African focused. However, we actually changed over a period of time to Analog Teams, because the way we show up is less about the fact that we are African and more about the fact that we do great work. So don't worry about the fact that we're African. It has nothing to do with what we're doing here. It has everything to do with the greatness that we bring to the table. And then you'll know that we're African by meeting us. Of course, my name as well. So you'll know us by our name, but less focus on that, and focus more on our delivery.
So that's really cool because, yeah, I tend to think that, you know, probably when I think back to, sort of key moments in history, I'd almost think about the Black Panther moment, the sort of
Mm,
Afro technology, modern, futuristic, seeing us in a sort of a more leader role rather than a follower role. And I think increasingly when we look at, say, the fintech space in Africa, mobile money and other sort of industries and spaces where clearly Africa is starting to lead there. I love the thinking around it's around the excellence. It doesn't have to be about Africa. And I think if you're trying to build a global business, then that becomes kind of critical, doesn't it? You need to sort of position yourself. Yes, we are African, but we are globally capable, correct? If I'm not wrong.
mhm,
Yeah.
exactly that. Exactly that.
So I'm just curious. So clearly there's, a problem or problems that you solve for the customers that you serve, and it seems that your business has a global footprint. I've been looking around at what you're doing in different markets, the US, across Africa, in Europe, and so forth. And it seems to me that the space you're in would probably be quite competitive, given that they're already established players, major billion-dollar companies offering these services. And I'm just curious in terms of what do you feel distinguishes you from the myriad of competitors in this space, and possibly what are some of the secret sources, things that make you somehow different or special from that perspective?
Yeah, without sounding too self-righteous, but we consider ourselves the best. And that's the first distinguisher is the fact that we put our best foot forward. We don't necessarily need to try and compete to be this billion-dollar company or try and go for speed. We really care about the quality and the delivery and the excellence in our delivery. So it may not always, I always, when I'm having conversation with clients, I always say that some of the things that distinguish us are intangibles. So they're not something that you may see on a piece of paper, et cetera. But when you experience working with someone from Analogue, just that experience alone, the passion, the accountability for the effort and the work that we put in, the consistency over a long period of time, the zeal, the hunger that you meet with the individuals that work at Analogue, the feeling of when you work with us, you feel like you're part of our tribe. You really feel like you have a home. You really feel like you're working with people who really, really care about even your mission. Some of those intangibles are really what set us apart. And then also, obviously, we play in a space where we deal with a lot of the incumbents or the people who are already sitting there are Indian. A lot of Indian companies, a lot of Ukrainian and UK, et cetera. So when we come into this space, we also, again, even though it's not a deciding factor, the fact that we are Africans, the fact that, in most of our countries, English is a first language. Our time zone is very similar to that of the UK. Just different experiences that we come and we bring to the table are what set us apart. The fact that we have a global footprint, the fact that the founders are in the US and are African descent. So we visit Africa, we're in Africa very often. We have this global community that we're building, and it allows us to reach and join and go into places that other companies cannot. And then also we're a smaller team, and so we really focus again on the individual. How do we propel that individual to the next level? We care more about the success of the person that works at Analogue on the contract, the individual. We care about the individual and how we can elevate that individual. And by a byproduct of that is them doing great work at the company that they're staffed at.
So let me understand how your model works, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially you're providing almost like an outsourced service, and you then sort of have your clients essentially onboard remotely or maybe in person the talent to do the work on their behalf. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
In terms of the model that you use, in terms of how you engage your customers, is it based on your clients essentially paying for a resource to work on projects or activities on their behalf in order to deliver services? So it's basically an outsourced professional who delivers certain, technology services, as it were, whether they're building, a mobile app or they're building, some kind of solution, and your people essentially are outsourced on their behalf, correct?
Yes, at a high level, that's what we do, and we have several different types of ways that we engage our clients. One of them, like you mentioned, is that outsource model where they have something they want to build, outsource it to us, and we build it for them. There's also the model in which we augment our staff. So someone would need an engineer or a developer or a designer, and we would staff them at that company. So they would work as if they worked at that company. And then we also have one of our the things that we've recently pivoted into and found a lot of success is also recruiting. And so we recruit for a lot of startups in the US for American talent, not just African talent, but American talent. And so we work with our clients. We consider ourselves a multi-service digital agency. And so we work with our clients in various capacities to fit their needs.
And I don't know whether you're in a position to maybe share some of your stories around clients you worked with or successful engagements where they were able to work with you. Maybe you're even able to disclose some significant names or brands that are known that you worked with? Are you in a position to share any of that at this point?
You want to get us in trouble, Moses? No, I am. Because we have great partnerships. One of our most interesting and one of our strongest partnerships is with a company called Dot Connect. They're a recruiting company in the States, and they recruit for some big names like NFL, Snapchat, Google, Qualcomm. And so we actually have individuals staffed on at NFL, Snapchat, Google, Qualcomm, Direct TV. And so some of our individuals work on various projects with some of those big name contracts and big name people that you mentioned. So it's been a phenomenal experience having us get into some of these companies that we naturally wouldn't have a chance to get into. But because of great partnerships, great people that we've met along the way, has yielded a great benefit for our company, and even great benefit for the companies we work with, because they're experiencing working with Africans for the first time.
Awesome. So next question is highly pertinent to the whole recruitment and hiring process in terms of, I personally have worked in the space of technology for over 20 years. I have an agency that's been around just as long. And one of the big challenges obviously is finding, recruiting, skilling up talent, and given the fact that you're hiring people, across Africa, across, the US and Europe, what are the things you look for when you're looking for talent so that, ultimately, that the foundation of your service delivery, and possibly, what are the nuances? Maybe it's a very different process to hiring, talent in Kenya or Nigeria versus, North America. What's that been like for you, and what have you noticed in that process? And then, of course, ultimately, what do you look for in these people?
Yeah, phenomenal question. I would say one of the things that I'm most proud about is our hiring practices. Getting hiring right is a very difficult thing to do. And I'm proud to say that our directors and leaders at our company at Analogue um, took whatever process we created and took it to the next level, in which it works across the board for all the countries we're in. We do have special nuances, but because we have leaders from South Africa, leaders from Kenya and Nigeria, who are involved in the interviewing process, one, we remove the bias, but also we have the expertise in each country to actually understand, the local differences, right? But one of the things, again, I'm most proud about the people we've brought on is, I always bring it up. We have Yoruba people working with Igbo people, working with Kikuyu from Kenya, working with Zulu from South Africa, right? So many different cultures all embedded into one. What we look for, again, is we have, you may have heard me mention this, we have our value sets that we hold very high in our company. And they're five. One is transparency, understanding, passion, accountability, and consistency. The thought process is that if you're a transparent and honest human being, we can spot that from the very early on in the conversation. That's the foundation of being able to work with someone, is understanding that they are going to be uniquely themselves. Understanding is someone who is not just tolerant, but understanding of different cultures, and doesn't play to the old adage that the Yorubas and the Igbos can't work together. We completely eradicate that idea at our company. And then the three foundational pieces of passion, accountability, and consistency. Why are you here, and what drives you, right? There are different things that drive different individuals, and no answer is wrong as long as you're being driven. That passion, we believe, will show up in your ability to gain levels, to skill up, to grow, to advance yourself, your own individual driven motivation. The second, or not the second, but accountability is really huge to us, because we believe that everyone should take responsibility for their wins and their losses. If you're able to take responsibility for your losses, it's not that you get kicked out. The idea is, once you take responsibility, we can say, okay, great, we've taken this loss. How do we learn from it? How do we get better? Where do we go from here? And when you have a win, we're so happy to cheer you on. In fact, in Analogue, we always say that you actually get pointed out if you don't do great work. Everyone who does great, it's almost the norm for everyone to deliver at a high capacity and a high level. And so when you don't do it, that's the people who we notice, right? And then lastly is consistency. Can we tell that when we hire you, over a long period of time, you're going to continue to deliver at a high level. Of course, there's space for people to go through things as human beings. But what we care about is what is really driving you to continually show up day in and day out and continue to deliver over and over and over again, because that's the true mark of greatness. And so once you're able to kind of fall into these 5 buckets, if you notice, I didn't mention anything about their skill sets. We believe that if you fall into these value sets, we can train you to do anything, right? As long as you're driven by something, as long as you're willing to be accountable for your own success, I can train you to be the CEO. I can train you to be anything that you really want to and desire to be, and will work hard enough to get there. So that's really the concepts that we believe in. And then, of course, you have a strong technical background. That's really great. That's an adage. You can communicate. Maybe you've worked internationally before. All of those things are small additions, but the core of our hiring has to do with our value sets.
No, that sounds excellent. So it seems like me that the culture really drives everything at the core, the nucleus of the business.
Absolutely.
And then I hear something else here. That famous saying, think local, act global. But I think it's almost like no local, deliver global. Meaning that when you said that thing about understanding how Nigeria works, understanding how Kenya works, and then presumably the leader in market is somebody who has those, has the pulse on how things operate locally, and that I think can be hugely important when we've seen huge instances where, with all due respect, let's say to South Africans, sometimes they come in markets like Kenya, and we immediately see clashing between cultures and mental models of how things work. And I love that, the fact that it's a local guy who can kind of understand where this developer or this designer is coming from, and can kind of work with them in the way that they're probably accustomed to, right?
Yeah. So even one of our directors, our director of product, Cavendish, she's from Kenya. She actually, when we hired her, she was in Nyeri,
Wow.
which yeah, so outside of Nairobi, a couple hours outside of Nairobi, and just the degree and the reach that we have. Our director of talent acquisition is not in. She's in South Africa, but she's not in Cape Town or Joburg. She's actually in Durban, which is still a very nice place to be, but but still, she's
It's not the
not
beaten track.
necessarily. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's not the beaten track. It's not the where everyone would expect them to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are literally reaching into all parts of our continent, all parts of our country. That's the beauty of being a globally distributed company. But we understand the locale. We understand where we are and which countries, the Ghanaians and all of that. We understand exactly what we are trying to do. And the beauty is that we've been accepted in all the countries that we operate in. No clashing. We have no clashing of cultures. We are really doing something that is uniquely different than a lot of the other companies in our continent in the world.
So I don't know whether you're able to tell me this, but how big is your team? I mean, this sounds interesting. I mean, I'm hearing countries, I'm hearing people in Nyeri, which again is not
Mhm.
where you'd imagine getting talent from in a country, in such a business in Kenya. But how big is the team now today as we speak?
Yeah, so as we speak, we've gone through some ups and downs. We're about 35 globally. We've been up to about 40, 50. And what I say is over the last 2 years, we've hired and trained over 100 different people. And so people come into our company and stay for quite some time. Some people stay for 6 months to a year. But one of the things that we love is that we actually recently had this conversation that we have a big focus that no one ever comes into Analogue and leaves worse than they came. So it doesn't matter if you're here for 6 months or 6 years or 2 decades, where I'll probably kick you out the company. I don't want you that long, but
Okay.
6 years. No matter what, the things that you learn, the experience that you gain, the opportunity to work globally, the connections that you have. And we always tell you're always part of the tribe, no matter what, you're part of our story. And so no matter how long you're here, we make sure that you are way better off than when you leave. And most people who leave from our company go on for better opportunities, make more money, higher positions, et cetera. And we cheer them on. We say, go, please. just carry the mark, which is our logo, carry the mark of Analogue everywhere you go, because your success is our success as well.
Okay, great, great. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic. How did this impact your business? You talked about ups and downs and all, but did you see positive, negative experiences in the process?
We love to say that the pandemic was actually very positive for us. Before the pandemic, we were struggling on where would we launch our campus? Where would our first input be? Where would we do it in Nigeria? Would we do it in Kenya? But once the pandemic happened, we were forced online, and we were forced to remove the idea of locally positioning ourselves locally, which actually expanded our reach for talent. We stopped caring about where you are, and we started caring more about who you are. Once we were able to do that, that's when we started really hiring people. That's when we started raising leaders and finding different individuals to work with. So that fundamentally changed the way we were thinking about our business. On top of that, more people that new clients were online versus us having to meet them in person, having to go to San Francisco or New York and try to shake hands to get contracts. Everyone was online. Everyone was reachable. So it didn't matter if you were in Erie, you could meet someone in DC, right? Virtually, because it didn't matter where your locale was. So that actually opened the doors to Analogue growing and becoming the company it is. So we constantly actually, as tough as the pandemic was for the rest of the world, and we acknowledge that, we look back fondly at that time period and say that's when we actually grew the most and expanded the bounds of our reality.
Awesome. And where do you see Analog going in the next, 2 to 5 years? Where's this business headed from your perspective?
That's a phenomenal question. Um, we actually had a great conversation today in our leadership about the things that we're focused on and the things we want to do. We've done a pretty hard pivot into recruiting versus software development. Our software development has gone more into working with product teams and investing in products. So Analogue invests heavily in software products across the board. So in 2 to 5 years, we are looking at being a household name specifically for recruiting. And then all of the products that we've invested in, we're hoping to see them really take root and take wings over the next couple of years, so that they can get very large valuations and we can have more Africans being a part of this venture capital world that's happening right now.
That's awesome. So recruitment really sounds like it's going to be the sweet spot going forward again, huh?
Yes, absolutely. The opportunity to not only just train people in recruiting, which goes into our mission of hiring and over 1,000 people by 2025. We're kind of closing in on that date, but also
Yeah.
we're able to position and place individuals, right? So not only are we focused on workforce development, we're focused on where you go after that workforce as well. So it just makes a lot of sense for our mission. And we really, really want to double down there and continue to explore that part of the market.
So what would you be saying to me, in terms of lessons learned? You've been around some years, you've done the ups and downs, you've come through a pandemic, pros and cons. Um, Analog teams, what are some of the key lessons that you've picked up creating this business?
Mm. Uh, yeah. The first thing would be don't be afraid to start. Have a plan, think through your plan, be strategic, but don't be afraid to start. And I know a lot of people who start businesses will tell you that thing, but it's not as cliche. And the hard part is continuously not being afraid to start. So even as you've built your company, it's doing a great thing. There's a new area you want to traverse and you want to take over. Don't be afraid to go that way. Don't be afraid to spend money and learn a lesson, right? Sometimes we always tell ourselves in leadership that learning lessons cost. It will cost you time and it'll cost you money. You might go down a path and you spend a lot of your time and energy going down that path and it's not fruitful and it costs you. However, make sure you take some lessons learned with you. The other thing is raise great leaders. That's like one of the most important things when building a business, is to not go alone. And then even when you don't go it alone, so you've got co-founders, making sure that the next group of people that you hire can aspire and can become great leaders and will be there for a long period of time. As I was mentioning with the hiring portion, I'm one of the last stops on the hiring in our company. When I used to do the outreach to the interview, to the entire process, and then hire people. Now I'm almost wholly removed from the hiring process because our leaders really understand what we are trying to get accomplished. So raising great leaders is something I constantly communicate to people. I even communicate it to my leadership. Who are you raising behind you? Who are you bringing to meetings? And hey, come with me to this meeting and sit behind and just don't say anything, but just learn. Be in the room, be a fly on the wall. Who are you picking out that you see is a star and saying, I'm going to put you in a position to lead this company one day? So leadership and raising leaders is extremely important for longevity over if you expect your company to last a long period of time. Not just replacing talent or hiring up, but making sure you're taking every single person you hire and put them on a track to greatness.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It seems like we've really run out of time. It really just went right by. Thank you so much for sharing everything you have on Analog Teams, what you're doing. I'm super impressed with the fact that you're building a global business, that you're looking at talent globally. That I think for me, the challenge I see a lot of startups do is they tend to sort of think very micro local, and it seems like from the get go you're looking at being global. And I think that really does provide the foundation to create a global business in the long term. So thank you so much. Much appreciated. I don't know if there's any last comments you have before we wrap up this conversation.
I would just like to, of course, thank you for having us. We love to share the work that we're doing. I always tell people that I'm just a face, but behind me are the hardest working people you've ever met, not just in Africa, but in the world. And some of the greatest minds and greatest individuals that are trying to solve really difficult problems. And so any opportunity I get to shine a light on the work that they're doing and just like the passion that they have to put us on the forefront of technology, I'm extremely honored. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, and I hope we have you back here again.
All right.